Broadcasting live from the Babadook's basement, this is the Monstrous Feminine, the podcast where horrible humans talk about horror. My name is Tyia, and I'm joined by my Fruit Loops,
Mila,
Louisa,
and Zeba.
And this is Season 2. If you're new here, go catch up and listen to Season 1 on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcast app. And you can find all of our links on our Instagram at the Monstrous Feminine Podcast.
To celebrate Pride Month, we'll be discussing queerness and horror. We will begin with the 1983 erotic horror cult film The Hunger, directed by Tony Scott. We'll then tackle the 2017 supernatural Norwegian horror drama Thelma, directed by Joachim Trier. Finally, we'll cover the 2020 British psychological horror Saint Maud, directed by Rose Glass. Enjoy!
So welcome back to Season 2. We asked you on Instagram some of your childhood gay awakenings through film and TV, cartoons, and so I'm going to read some of the answers out. There was some patterns, some repeat offenders.
We got a type, collectively.
Okay, so Shigo we got, I think, like 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
Strong.
And people were in the comments were questioning if Shigo is queer coded at all. I don't think it matters if she's turning people left and right.
I feel like it's like a projected queer coded kind of situation.
Like, have you seen those TikTok like trends where it's like name something that's straight but it's actually gay, and then name something that's gay but it's actually straight? Yeah.
Exactly. We had someone who said summer high can dawn till dusk. And first I didn't realize what you were talking about, and I Googled it immediately. I was like, yes, I think everyone shares that like mental image of their head of her in that bikini. I haven't seen the film. I have no idea what it's about.
I've never seen the film.
But that image is iconic. Agree. Louisa, Black Swan sex scene came up twice.
When did that come out?
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
That was prime Louisa's discovering she is queer as fuck time.
I also thought, I was like, it came out a few years ago, but you're right, like it's now over a decade ago.
Because I saw it and just had so many feelings.
So many feelings. I saw that in the cinema as well. I actually don't remember how I felt about it.
In cinema? Oh my god, I didn't watch it in cinema. I watched it in the privacy of my own room, and thank fucking God I did.
I watched it with all my friends who, weekend out from Catholic school.
I indeed did the same thing, Mila.
But that came up twice.
Oh
We had, and actually there was another Mila Kunis lesbian sex scene, and it's in the movie called After Sex, and she has a sex scene and like a relationship with Zoe Saldana, which I've seen.
You know what?
Okay, that I understand.
That is also creme de la creme, like 10 out of 10.
Minus the fact that Zoe Saldana is problematic, but
I was going to say she's hot, and so that doesn't matter. But,
stunning.
Didn't we already decide that hot people get a pass? They're problematic.
Oh dear. We also had, thank you, Tyia, the Cruel Intentions kiss. Yes, absolutely. 90s highlight of the decade.
Did anybody say Max Goof from the Goofy movie? Okay, I'm gonna say that one.
Final answer.
I feel attacked.
That's Tyya's man. You need to back up. We also have, is it called Lost City of Atlantis or just Atlantis? The cartoon. We have, I didn't know this was her name, Helga St. Clair, the blonde.
Yeah.
Who the hell is
I don't know
that?
who
She's
that
the
is.
one. If you don't know, then you don't know.
In the city of Atlantis? I thought her
Yes.
name was Kita, like the one with the
Yeah,
white
her
hair.
too, of course. No one said it in this particular survey, but yeah.
She was the superior option.
I agree.
Well, you can fight this person about it.
Okay, cool.
I think 3 times Thelma in the orange spandex from Scooby-Doo.
Oh, the
Okay,
movie.
yeah. I would like to add the whole cast of Road to El Dorado.
Oh my god, yeah.
What was her name in Hercules? I think.
Meg.
Oh,
She was
Meg.
Yeah.
Oh my god, how did I forget about Meg? Oh, I didn't fucking say Jasmine. Jasmine from Aladdin, when she gets stuck
that's
in
a
that.
good one.
I know it's bad, and I know, okay, no one analyzed this, but when she's trapped in the hourglass, and yeah, I'm sorry.
All right.
I kind
All
of,
chained up.
I might have just revealed a kink there. But
Yeah. We had 2 Bella Swans.
Wow.
Bella Swan. Was
Yeah,
that
one
Louisa?
of them was Louisa, correct. And then we've got Danny Phantom a few times.
I knew someone was going to say Danny Phantom. Danny Phantom's trans. That's That's factual canon.
Oh.
No, it's not. Don't. But
I know, but I see it. I love an out there interpretation that actually works, and I'm gonna go with that.
Also, within this Danny Phantom suggestion is Chris Evans is the Human Torch. And
Chris Evans?
that one tiger
Is that
from
who
Zootopia.
I think it is?
Chris Evans is in like Captain America?
Through the Zootopia thing and like so.
you swept the Zootopia thing under the rug. I'm gonna need you to back up.
The really wimpy tiger man who was a police officer, right?
not he's an extra. He has like minimal screen time. Yeah,
Are you serious?
What
He's not even a
the
main
hell?
character.
Just type
is
in
this?
that one tiger from Zootopia.
Oh, wait, I get it. Look at this fan art.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
No, not okay, yeah. You guys are fucking weird.
No, absolutely. I
mean, at
back
first, I thought you meant the lion mayor.
No, listen, that tiger is a provider. Like, he's going to provide for this family.
That's all I want.
Sam from Danny Phantom. I don't know about Danny Phantom. Who is Sam?
She's
That's
a
his,
friend,
like,
the
goth
girl.
girlfriend.
Okay, that makes sense.
They're just friends.
I made them a couple in my head.
Elizabeth Swann from Pirates of the Caribbean. Eris from Sinbad, the goddess in it, who's voiced by Michelle Pfeiffer. I think it's Michelle Pfeiffer. I'm going to pretend it is.
I did see the cartoon. I didn't like it. It gave
It's
me
not
a
very
headache.
good.
I feel very similar about that spirit cartoon.
No, fuck off.
With the horse?
Fuck off. That is a masterpiece. I will not take any slander.
It gave me the worst headache. And I
No,
watched
no,
it
no,
at
no,
my
no, no,
mom's
no, no.
friend's
Mila's a
house.
horse girl. Are we supposed to talk about why horror is gay and our thoughts on pride?
Yeah.
We're supposed to talk about the fact that horror is exclusively gay through and through.
Gay.
I struggle to think of a horror movie that isn't gay.
In the same way, you can interpret anything as queer if you really want it to be. Like, I stand by that.
But y'all wouldn't let us do the Babadook this episode. It's fine. Like, I feel like all there is to say about that is, like, that's truly anything could be gay. Like, I have watched that movie looking for it. I've been like, is the kid gay? Is the Babadook gay? Is the mom gay? And the answer is yes, if you look hard enough.
Yes,
and I think that's
each and
true
every
of, like,
one.
most queer media is just, like, people deciding it was gay because you're not gonna let it be. Like, the way we sat here and talked about Memento Mori as if, like, those were heterosexuals and they want us to believe it. We don't know. We know the truth. It's all undercover.
I think something else that makes horror very queer is I just saw the movie Luca yesterday. Very cute, by the way. But like in the movie, there's sea monsters or whatever. But I think it's like being the secret or like the object experience of where like society is scared of something or they fear it because they don't understand it is like a very queer related emotion and experience. Especially because I think, like, in horror, a lot of the times, like, the main character is very ostracized. Like, in The Craft, like, they were the people who didn't fit in. Like, in The Babadook, the son is, like, very different. And she, like, screams, why can't you just be normal at him? I think those are, like, things that, to me...
Pride kind of sucks, but I do celebrate it.
I feel like that's with most, like, cultural events or holidays. You're like, it sucks, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, like that's how I feel about it. As in, obviously, like the sentiment I like, I love, the history. I just don't like the pink washing. It's just like too much. I don't like how everything goes rainbow. I don't like how everything's slotted in 1 month.
On Twitter, I saw like Skittles that had, because obviously they're normally rainbow.
They're already rainbow.
Yeah.
They'd stripped the colors so they were white, and the supermarket label was white Pride Skittles.
White Pride
No.
Skittles? Was this a real thing?
You're wrong.
Skittles make me want to throw up, so it wouldn't surprise me if they're racist.
There's a lot of skincare brands that release like Pride exclusive bottles, and that to me makes even less sense because it's just the only thing on it that's rainbow is the writing, and I'm like, I don't think anyone wants a product with just rainbow writing on it. Yeah. And like they don't donate anything to causes or anything.
I feel like Pride is like Pride, at least in New York, like Pride the event, Pride the parade is for straight people.
I mean, I think it started to be when people started dressing up in rainbow stuff, taking those pictures that say love is love, and it was like every celebrity did that for like 2 years straight, and I was like, please.
I mean, the only distinction that I can make, and like, okay, I'm not going to get into discourse, and y'all stop me before I get there.
Okay.
I for one am proud, right? That's cool.
Boo.
But like, people are afraid to say what is queer because you don't want to make it something like not normal. So this whole like pride isn't about sex, pride is about X, or pride isn't about, you know, horror and camp, it's about blank, and the blank is usually something pretty straight and annoying.
Like love.
Yeah, it's something universal, like love or parades or barbecues or families, and like, of course, all of that is part of pride, but like, to deny that like pride is about sex in any capacity is wrong, and the same way like to deny that there is like pride wrapped up in horror is wrong, because a lot of the times it's like in a little bit of an offensive way, like, or we have to like make a reach about it, but to like strip the things that you think are like unsavory or not respectable from pride is where my issue comes in. Like the corporatization, there's nothing you can stop, but like I think trying to make gay normal is wrong. Because it's not normal, and it's not normal because of the circumstances. Yeah. Right? Like the way that pride came about was not normal. It shouldn't have had to have come about that way. But we're here now, and like denying that history is the pinkwashing.
I agree with everything you just said.
The idea that there needs to be this like forced assimilation into society, like it's not done in the
And society's
right
capitalism.
Way. Yeah.
We could really go into that.
The people who scream like love is love and like allyship also really want you to make spaces comfortable for them. That is the direct opposite of allyship. Even with like other activism events, I'm just gonna say they'll be like, the cure for everything is love trumps hate, and I'm like, the main people who say this, I just do not typically see them giving people unconditional love. It's very conditional to be like, you need to still be in these confines of what is acceptable, or elsewhere where like you're the outlier, and I can only be an ally to like this specific version of experience.
I feel like it's okay for people not to understand. There's like this need to categorize everything and like study it to death and like have an awareness. That's like an activist buzzword now, awareness. And I'm just kind of like, okay, like cool, like yeah, don't be like ignorant, but also like it's okay to not understand everything about it. Like you don't have to like understand the ins and outs of everything to be cool with.
I have very strong feelings about what you just said, Louisa, because the death of expertise is something that deeply bothers me. Because people have now the impression that you can be an expert on something in 10 minutes because you read an infographic on it on Instagram, and you could never learn people's lived experience from a fucking infographic. I hate to tell people that. I appreciate that people are trying to educate themselves on issues, that this is people's real life, and like you cannot sit on the internet and make bold claims for something that will never affect you. It's absolutely ridiculous to me.
Also, expecting queer people to be the experts is also wrong. Like, I could not definitely tell you my own gender and sexuality. So, like, I feel like asking anybody to have it figured out is a little bit bullshit. So, like, educate yourself, but also, like the people that straight people lean on to tell them about what is cool in the gay community is, like, RuPaul and, like, a goddamn, like, sometimes Lena Waithe, like, y'all need to stop. You need to, like, back up and figure it out.
Yeah, I think, you know what, it's a little bit of a side-eye at the queer community as well, because I think, like, so many people within it are, like, really shackled to the idea of representation being the be-all and end-all, and it's like, I think you also, like, as a community, need to take a hard look at ourselves and be like, it's not the be-all and end-all. We've talked about the problems with representation when the people behind it, or the sole people who are representing the community, are problematic. So it's just kind of like, unshackle that. And also, I agree with what you're saying, Tyia. I think people just need to start with your own lane. Like, what are the problems in your own life?
Another way that, like, media misunderstands or misuses representation is that it's used in a way to, like, feed to generally like a white straight audience, to make them understand. That's like the content that's being produced, is to like teach this underrepresented identity or community to this white family sitting at home.
For LGBT representation, it's almost always like they love a Muslim family that does not accept queer child.
Oh, yeah.
They love a poor black boy in the hood who is struggling with his homosexuality in an environment that doesn't accept him, or somebody dying. Like, that is it.
Or it could be something so ridiculously straight, I think, such as Love Simon. Who was that said that? Was it you, Mila, who said Love Simon is straight, or was it you, Zeba? I don't know. It was one of you guys.
I think Love Victor is better than Love Simon.
Yeah, it
Love
might be.
Victor
I haven't seen Love Victor, but Love Simon I hated, and I was like, I think this is it's giving gay people are just like you.
What makes me angry about these movies is that, say for instance, there's two black kids in the school. The odds that those two black kids are going to fall in love with each other is low. So why on these movies, they're like, there's two queer kids in the school and they're in love? I'm like, that is just not realistic.
You know what?
They
It
take what
kind
they
of
can
is
get.
realistic sometimes. I see where you're coming from, but I have to query that in my... I have definitely, especially when I first came out and I was like really searching for somebody, like someone, it was like the first queer person I saw. I was like, gonna be you. Like literally the first person who hit on me as I was out, I slept with. Sorry, Mom.
I just had like a brain blast memory from like my childhood when I was watching Will and Grace, like when it was on as a kid, and my parents have, you know, gay friends, trans friends. Like I grew up around gay people as a little kid, but still didn't know what it was. So I was watching Will and Grace, and that's when they said the word gay all the time, and no one had ever used that word. And I like asked my dad, I was like, what is that? And he explained it to me, but for years I was like, gay is a way that you act. It's not who you like sleep with, because I had no context for sex. So like that representation was so weird. I'm like, there are gay people on like grown-up shows, right? I know that. And like they act in a very particular way. In the early 2000s, it was all like very flamboyant. I didn't know Will was gay on Will and Grace because like he didn't act the way that TV told me gay was. And the people who were actually gay adults in my life, they didn't act like the people on TV. So I didn't know they were gay. And so like for years that like this like single lane media like didn't allow me to see real people in my life for the way that they were.
I agree that labels can be really useful in any sort of journey to discover like who you are and what you align with. I feel like people feel like you can't change them and they can't be fluid, and that's obviously like the wrong approach. But obviously media likes to categorize and like have very strict tropes. There's an obsession in like Western culture with needing to
Categorize so you can subjugate.
exactly, and also like coming at it from more, I guess, like a increasingly secular and like science orientated society. Like there's this need to also find some kind of psychological or biological basis. It's sort of pitted against like that's religious extremism where it's like gay is bad and wrong, it's not what God intended, and you'll be like, but science has proved that being gay is normal. There's this need to like
You have to like
tangible
evidence. What is that? Like you need empirical fucking evidence. When you're in like a very like terrorized environment as that, it's useful to have such like backing as like those like facts, like in nature it's gay. But I think like that's in response, like obviously that's like a defense. I think once you like are in a more accepting environment, then you just realize like, oh, these labels are actually just more shackling. Like I just switch between so many. I was originally bi, and I'm jury's still out whether I was actually bi or if it just like changed, or if I was just like gay.
The jury's still
out. I don't even know, because there are times like I listen to other like lesbian identifying people and they're like, oh, you know, I was like so disgusted, hated experiences with men. And I was like, I didn't hate it. It wasn't the best, but like it was all right. But like you have like a varying spectrum, so I was just like, I don't know. I would think I was bi, and then it changed. I think it's like labels are only as useful as like at the time.
you have eras, you know?
Yeah, you have eras.
You change.
You change.
There's a reason though that religion and science are in nearly every movie that we're talking about today. Like those two aspects are like constantly in conflict with each other, and they're always like one is used to like, I don't know, I don't think they're in opposition, but I do understand that like people like feeling the need to defend themselves with not just science and scientific labels, but also like
spiritual,
Yeah.
spiritual, and also like needing to say like, hey, the way I identify is in a book, so you can't then deny it.
True.
But for like a lot of us, like the gray area is so gray that like,
how are you gonna do it?
The only people demanding labels are those who do not have to label themselves.
I have to say, it makes me so deeply upset that religion has turned into such a bastion of hate, because originally, like, what it was there for was to be escapism from how horrible the world really was, and like guidance, and people turned into like this very weird morally superior puritanism shit that is currently going on today.
I think it's just like the need to categorize humans to death is like in like the system that we're currently operating in. It doesn't matter what dominant ideology will operate in, and even if you have a woke ideology, it's still going to be needing to categorize people to death, because that's just the system in which we live in, and we just need to get past this idea. Like, all of these things are social constructs, and we could just simply be.
That's what's queer. The grey area in between science and religion, that's where we move away from needing to like categorize.
At some point, I think people have to think about like how cis men dominate queer media and in the mainstream, like how Billy Porter's the only person who ever gets nominated for anything from Pose and gets all the photo shoots and stuff, despite the fact that Pray Tell is not necessarily the main character. It's Blanca, and MJ Rodriguez should be getting all of the flowers for that show as well as the rest of the cast, but it's just Billy Porter. And how like Queer Eye as a show, like all of them were iconized and like turned into these figures of like absolute wokeness and authority on queer stuff.
Karamo don't know shit. We can cut this out later, but Karamo, if I see you in the street,
wait,
RuPaul also is fracking. We can talk about that. Okay, RuPaul has land that he has, like, is getting paid to let oil companies frack on.
This is what I mean. It's not about representation. It's about the voting systems.
Like, no offense, but men gonna be men.
And that's why we're only talking about lesbians today.
You're canceled. Next.
This is what we mean about visibility and representation isn't the end all, because at some point you're selling out to the systems that are literally oppressing you.
I don't mind like a month to like concentrate or celebrate or something, like if you really want, or like to give people more financial backing or opportunities. But I just think when it's like all of our friggin' place in society hinges on that one month of representation and how palatable and how sellable you are, that's where the problem is. The Monstrous Feminine is on Apple Podcasts, so go leave us a 5-star review, and if you do, you might just get a shout out in our next episode as our Witch of the Week. And our Witch of the Week this week is Madeline Loves Dracula, great name, who says perfection and gives us 5 stars and says, I didn't realize how much I needed a podcast that talked about all these things until I discovered this one. If you've read Christopher's Powers of Horror, or of course The Monstrous Feminine by Ms. Barbara Creed, / you've witnessed how often women and their bodies are seen as scary, gross, or abject, this is such satisfying discourse. It's empowering, academic, thoughtful. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with this review. That was really nice. Thank you so much. What do we wish for them, Coven?
A great summer solstice.
Yeah. Yes.
May your crops be plentiful and your skin be clear.
Oh, yes.
The Jupiter retrograde is going to bring you abundance. That means, you know, money, love.
Yeah, thank you. And if you do love our podcast, we are actually launching a Patreon. So if you love listening to the Monstrous Feminine Podcast, but you want more, you can subscribe to our Patreon. And we have a little tier system as it stands now. Tier 1 is called Dies First. And for a small amount, you can get access to our Discord, where you can talk amongst yourselves, form a little community, and we'll dip in and out and say hi. And for Tier 2, called Final Girl, you can get access to our Discord again, but also an extended monthly episode. So if you want to see some of the stuff that we cut out, please go subscribe. And yeah, we'd love if you would support us.
In The Hunger, a vampire named John discovers that his time of prolonged youth is coming to an inevitable end, despite the fact that his lover, Miriam, an ancient vampire, promised him eternal youth. When John begins aging rapidly, he visits Sarah, a doctor that studies the process of aging, in the hopes that she can slow the process. Instead of finding a cure, Miriam decides to replace John with Sarah as her next lover.
The timeless beauty of Catherine Deneuve, the cruel elegance of David Bowie, the open sensuality of Susan Sarandon, combine to create a modern classic of perverse fear.
I mean, I was there for Catherine Deneuve and only her. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg is like one of my favorite films. So I used to be so obsessed with her when I was younger. Also a little bit now, but I think she might be a little bit right-wing, so not as much these days.
Oh, didn't she say questionable things about the Me Too movement?
I'm sure we've also said questionable things about the Me Too
Yeah.
movement.
But again, she is hot, and so she gets a pass.
She's stunning.
And so are we. That's why we get a pass.
And her clothes in this movie were sensational. I feel like they really put all the effort into being like, make her look hot. I'm pretty sure she's older than Susan Sarandon, but she looked younger than her in this movie.
I thought
they looked the same
Catherine...
age.
Yeah. Oh, I was going a different route. I thought Catherine and Susan Sarandon looked exactly the same.
It was a bit doppel-bangy.
It was a doppel-bang. I love that.
Can I ask a controversial question?
Yes.
Where do we all stand on David Bowie? I'm pretty anti.
Oh, are we I don't know
I have
anything
no real
about
strong
him.
feelings about him, to be
Oh,
honest.
he was allegedly caught up in that like group of rockers who like would keep underage groupies around. Bowie movies have like a special place in my heart just because the presence of him means it's like a camp fantasy that we love. I feel the same way about like Labyrinth and all that, but like there were moments where I'm like, it's interesting that he's rapidly aging because he's around all these like young women. Like that is like the center of his like role in this. And there's also what is her name, the very young one.
I was going to ask you the same thing about the fact that we associate like vampires killing grounded in sex and desire, and the fact that he kills this child. I wondered if any of you was like immediately
Also,
uncomfortable.
wasn't
about
she
that.
being groomed by the lady Miriam to like be her next lover?
Yeah.
Which, again, problems.
What? Was that the situation? I thought they were just teaching her violin, fam. I didn't know. Oh, no. No, it makes sense because at the end, Sarah has 3 people there, and I didn't know why the, like, other woman was there. So maybe Sarah did the same thing and started grooming somebody else to become, like, the 3rd. That's wild. Did not realize that was happening. I'm looking at it slightly differently. I did think it was gruesome that they killed a child. I feel like in horror movies, they don't tend to cross that boundary. And in this movie, they were like, we're doing it. Okay, no, there are a lot of horror films that have a dead kid, but I don't feel like you often see it. You just see like a scary ghost child, but you don't like see them die, usually.
Or they die by circumstances. They're not like killed.
Yeah, murdered.
I must say, like, this movie and Interview with a Vampire both have like a child that is either murdered or turned into a vampire, and they took very different approaches to it. Like in Interview with a Vampire, it was you didn't even remotely think that they turned her into a vampire because they wanted to groom her into their lover or anything like that. It was very obvious like that they wanted her to be like their child. But in this one, like there is a sense that she was getting violin lessons and that there was an interest in her taking John's place because he was rapidly aging when she became of age.
Oh my god.
And so I'm like, that is a very different approach to how they
she
handled
set
that.
it off. She set off the aging process.
I'm not sure about that, but
Okay.
I do think she was ideally thought, okay, he has X amount of time left. She should be legal then. That's who's going to take his place.
God,
especially because she was going to be quite young.
realize.
So it would be like, it would take her a while to start rapidly aging. I think that's why she was going younger, because they started aging quicker than she had planned.
Oh my god, I did not know there's a pedo element to this film. I have no
And
notes
so
on
I was
that.
like, this is very strange.
We've talked about this, I forget what film it was, where we talked about, or maybe it wasn't even with y'all. I was talking recently about how a lot of, we were talking about Call Me By Your Name. Maybe we cut it out of the episode. But a lot of like early queer relationships are with somebody older, because you need a mentor to like introduce you into the world.
I have thoughts
and
on
like
this.
whether or not that's right, whether or not that's probably, but it's very common. Like I think, and it's more common than we talk about publicly in media, because then we really have to unpack it, and it goes back to that thing of wanting to seem respectable for straight people. Like, this is something that we need to discuss and unpack, because it's a very common experience.
I was like talking about this with my queer friend, and I was like, it is a trope at this point. Like, Carol does this whole mother-daughter thing. Ammonite, again, a more recent one, did a whole mother-daughter sort of metaphor there. And I'm like, why? To be fair, my friend is into older women, is a lesbian who's into older women, and I was like, you're really not helping us here. But like, in general, I was like, this needs to stop being a trope, because I don't understand why people think that queer equals mommy issues, in the same way that, I guess, for, like, cis straight people, it's been, like older men has equaled daddy issues, and I'm like, I don't think you can... Why does it have to be, like, why are we replicating that trope that we've seen, I guess, in more straight cis media? Like, why do we need it for us? I don't understand. I don't think it's as common. I guess, like, no, there are a lot of age gap relationships, I should say. It is kind of common, but, like, we need to talk about, like, how they're kind of not always the best, especially when they start underage.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm even talking about people with age gaps. I'm talking about, like, the experience of your first queer relationship being with somebody at least a couple years older. Like, even if it's not, even if you're both like minors, I've seen it with like 14 and 17
There's a power
year olds,
differential.
or like a 17-year-old and a 25-year-old, because especially if you grow up somewhere where there isn't like a very open queer community, you need somebody to like open those doors for you and introduce you to other people, and it usually starts off as a mentorship or a friendship. And, like, I think it's that is actually very common. And usually it's only people's, like, first relationship. And then once they are grown themselves, that they hopefully date age appropriately. But sometimes they turn around and do it to younger people.
I like I've said, I don't have a problem with age gap relationships, because, like, this is my disclaimer. I don't have a problem with age gap relationships so long as everybody is, like, at least over the age of 25 is kind of what I've decided. I was like, after that, like, do what you want to do, because you're a grown adult, and hopefully have, like, independence, and there'll be, like, less of a power differential. But, like, I think I'm more talking about, like, when it starts very young, mostly underage.
Do you guys feel like this movie did this in a way with, like, her having to show them into the vampire lifestyle? And so they were, like, completely dependent upon her? In a way, like, it almost seems like that is the main reason why
lifestyle.
why she was targeting the student Alice, because I think her past partners like turned on her earlier because they realized she like lied about what she was promising them with like, you'll live forever, but it was like they were essentially just dying forever because they started aging rapidly because she got them in like their 30s. And so I think like she in the movie is going for the younger person because they're going to need her longer, which is even more predatory, and like they're going to basically believe her lies for a longer period of time.
She don't love them people. Can we talk about it? When I found out that they were just in those coffins forever, I was like, she doesn't love anybody. This isn't love. Like, it's so fucked
like
up. And she knows from the beginning what she's going to do.
I have no opinion on this. She's lonely, she's desperate for love, and the hunger is for love and not for sex, and that is my
Mila,
conclusion.
I'm concerned about you.
I do definitely
usual.
do think the hunger is like the loneliness that she feels, but I also feel like the film is like implying that people can do really bad things out of like loneliness and like hunger for love, because she's essentially lying to these people to entrap them forever in her
No, but they're
basement.
disposable to her. She disposes of them, and she even starts planning for the next before the other one has started aging.
She's a femme fatale for sure.
She can't be alone though, like she's incapable of being alone, and it's not like she like buries their coffin somewhere in the edge of town. Like she keeps them there because like she just physically can't be alone. But I do agree, she didn't love any of these people. It's just she needs someone to have that place next to her, a warm body.
It's about control. It's about control for sure. But do you want to hear what Ms. Barbara Creed had to say about this? I've done some Creed research, or Creesearch, as I have formally termed it in my head. So, first of all, Creed has some thoughts about the female vampire in general. Just the fact that we've talked about it before. They're very abject figures, vampires in general. Living, dead, human, animal. They cross gender boundaries because a female vampire becomes like kind of predatory, and in that way they're more masculized because they're the seducer rather than the seduced in typical media. And there's a constant association with blood, which is also very abstract. And it's very interesting what you guys are saying about the pedophilia aspect. I did not catch on, but Barbara Creed also goes on a weird tangent about how she thinks that sort of starting your period and the vampire myth, when it's like connected to a cisgender female, is like are quite related. So apparently in I'm quoting Creed here, but in Idols of Perversity, a fascinating analysis of the representation of women in European art points out that there was a belief that women became a vampire to replace the blood that she lost during her period. I was like, interesting. Creed also quotes another theorist who thinks, Barbara Walker, who thinks that like drinking blood has links to the moon, because the moon, if you're talking about like the four humors, blood is one of the humors in ancient times, and like during the moon, like it can control our bodily fluids, so that will be the time where your blood's like most alive in your veins, and it can bring back the blood of the dead, like it's a time of rebirth, like because even the dead's blood will like rise. And then that's also why vampire crosses over with werewolf lore, because there's like an association with the moon. So that was kind of like general things that she said. There's also an association with like hypersexuality, because like you'll see like usually the female vampire victim is resistant, and then after they're bitten they become like quite lustful for blood. Then there's a lot of archaic mother tropes, and I think this is where we're coming across here, or what we're touching on with this, when we're talking about like, is it love, is it possession? And I guess with archaic mother, it's necessarily both. So Creed points out that Creed talks about the Hunger specifically, because it's from 1983, so Creed time. And Miriam is, whereas in like Dracula, the archaic mother is hinted through imagery, in this film, she's present, she's there. She's the devouring, cannibalistic, incorporating mother, but she's also a possessive, smothering, suffocating mother who refuses to let go. And she is kind of like a vampire lover mother, as in she like makes them her child and utterly dependent on them. She also teaches them how to feed, and then she like is also seducing them at the same time. Creed thinks that her attic is a womb, and her putting her lovers up there is her symbolically returning them,
reincorporating them into the womb.
Yes, but also like a twisted version of the womb, because she's now dried up. She can no longer nourish them with blood. It's not enough. And in this lore, or this film, Creed thinks that like blood and milk are mixed and they're synonymous. Like, so particularly in the sex scene with Sarah, like when she's like feeding her blood and it goes back and forth and there's this exchange. Yeah, it's kind of like, you could like read it as kind of incestuous as well, because she's like basically nurturing her with her own blood milk kind of thing. She thinks it like,
wow, you're taking me on a journey here.
Yeah. So when they become lovers, she says a series of boundaries are crossed. There's a symbolic mixing of blood and milk. There's a collapse of boundaries between self and other, and also a possible retreat into narcissism because they look alike. And yeah. Also, side note, we really need to talk about queer people who only date people of the same gender who look like them. Like, honestly, what are you doing?
Doppel-banging.
Yeah, doppel-banging. But it's weird.
But aren't you scientifically supposed to be attracted to people who look like you? I think you're actually supposed to be attracted to people who look like you because biologically you are.
Do you want to diversify your gene pool?
Y'all, I'm serious. This is actually a thing.
It is a thing, but it's weird.
It's a thing in child psychology. Like, children are more likely to want to make friends with people who look like them or their family. But once you're grown, you should want to diversify and strengthen your gene pool. So, but like, listen, gays aren't breeders, so do what you will, I suppose.
Well, that's essentially what she concludes with. Basically, the lesbian vampire relationship as represented in The Hunger emphasizes three areas: orality, death, and incest, which works to cement the mother-child relationship rather than bring about the separation which is necessary for the institution of sociality and the law, which basically means that the cisgender mother lesbian vampire refuses the separation which is necessary for a father, in sort of Freudian or Lacanian terms. So that's why
He can't keep getting away with this.
You can't keep getting away with this. Freud! We're on to you.
But yeah, so I think that's why like she has to be depicted as predatory or like bad, because otherwise this polyamorous queer way of living would not be acceptable. That's why she's a rapist. That's why she's that's why she's pedophilic. That's why she's kind of predatory, and that's why she's a femme fatale who like disposes of them so carelessly. I think that's more of like the and if you notice, like Sarah goes back to like heterosexuality at the end, so you could look at that as kind of like reinscribing her back.
I assumed that it was like, I don't know, queer through and out. That's not the right phrase, but you know what I mean.
Through and through? Through and through.
Through and through, thank you. I thought it was queer through and through, and then it had like one of those tropes in which homosexuality is like shown as a perversion and aligned with paedophilia, and I was like, wait.
Mm-hmm. Why do we have to do that every time?
I don't know if you guys have seen Queen of the Damned, but I somehow felt like that movie was more queer than this one, and there was nothing. I don't think there was an explicitly queer couple in this.
But you can do
Queen
that.
Of the Damned, but I was like, But like the Lestat in that film is chef's kiss, in my opinion. He's just like this very androgynous rock god dude, and it just works. There was a lot going on in this one that I was like, hell no.
Creed's points are all about the ways that her character is like misogynistic or written in a misogynistic way. She's not hitting the homophobia on the head, right? Like, and I think that's also because, I mean, we're talking about all lesbians this week, so I'm sure we'll get into this, but there's like a very different way that like, especially like bi women get treated as like, oh yeah, everyone wants to have sex with women. That's not gay. You know?
Yeah. I think just everyone is gay is my rebuttal.
Yeah.
The intro to this movie was a ride, and I felt like,
oh yeah,
I was like, what?
It was like the 80s synth pop, and then Bowie is singing Bella, what is it? Bella Lugosi is dead. Bella Lugosi is the actor who played Dracula first, like the original Dracula. And that was a song that Bowie wrote for the movie, I'm pretty sure.
What did you guys think of the potential references to the AIDS epidemic? Because I thought, like, obviously it's quite a lot of reviews have picked up on the blood mixing anxiety, which was like very strong, and her boyfriend's almost like angry that she mixed her. It's like really weird. Like, he's mostly angry about that, I think, more so than the potential infidelity that he's like thinking of.
When did this movie come out?
1983.
Okay.
But I also felt like something that's not as pointed out that I was like noting is more so than the blood mixing, the rapid aging of John for me was like very much mimicking the rapid physical deterioration that like people who suffered from AIDS underwent.
Yeah, he even had the bruises.
Yeah, the bruises, the like spots, like it was like really intense. So that was like that kind of imagery I think was screaming more so than the blood, or maybe they were both in tandem with each other. But I was wondering, I was like, how could that possibly not be a deliberate
also, like,
reference?
The forever death that she leaves them in, like, as a, like, kind of mimics the way that the government essentially just let people die because they didn't do anything, and she did nothing to try to help her partners.
Yeah. She was supposed to find a cure, and she just slept with Sarah, the researcher.
I drew your blood, and then you took mine. You're crazy. You belong to me. We belong to each other. Getting out of here. You'll be back. You'll be back. When the hunger hurts so much, you've lost all reason, then you'll have to feed.
In Thelma, a young college student from a strict religious upbringing begins to experiment with drinking, smoking, and her sexuality, which seems to induce fits of vigorous, inexplicable seizures. As Thelma's feelings for her friend Anya grow more intense, the fits become more frequent, and alongside them come curious other supernatural phenomena. Thelma turns to the past for an explanation and discovers there may be more to these seizures than she originally believed.
Hur stressar du? Först in nu.
Herre, fjärn lite från mig. Fräls mig för distant nu. Herre, jag ber dig, lösas mig. Nej, ta det väck, ta det väck, ta det väck.
This is like one of the best openings to a film I've ever seen.
So the opening is with the lights flickering?
The opening is with the father and the daughter going hunting, and then the end is him turning the gun on her away from the deer, and then you get the title of the film. That is fucking perfection, like one of the best, because I was immediately hooked, but it was also so like unexpected.
I forgot about the intro while I was watching it. That would have informed a lot of the things about the dad and daughter relationship.
The intro for that really threw me off. It made me forget how everything else started. But I agree. I really like this movie, as obvious. I've been begging to do it for a while. I think I also said in like our little intros when we first started the podcast and we did those little things. It was like my favorite horror movie, my favorite Mon film. I think mine was Thelma. I like how this movie, one, the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. Two, I think it plays with a lot of different like aspects of horror. Like one of them being like the fear of like not being accepted, like religious extremism, like powers that you can't control. Also like just this experience of like her falling in love for the first time and not knowing if that person loves her genuinely or if she's being able to control their feelings for her, which I think is like a very young people emotion. I'm saying this as though I'm old, but I'm young too, guys. Which I think adds like an element of interestingness to like a very, what could be mundane coming of age, I fell in love for the first time movie, but it's like I fell in love for the first time and found out I had an insane superpower that I can make people do anything I want them to do and make any sort of reality appear.
I just realized as you were saying that like, because one of the things I wanted to ask you guys about was like, what does consent mean in this film? If we're, spoiler alert, ending, realizing that Thelma has the ability to like attract people towards her if she feels that attraction herself. But what you're saying there, I think resonates with like a common anxiety within like a lesbian community of like, oh, I don't want to be predatory. How do I hit on someone without being predatory? Like, you know, like I think it's just like where you live in like a patriarchal society where so much of the way that other people express sexual attraction towards you has been predatory. You don't want to mimic that. And a lot of people, especially the ones I'm seeing on TikTok, are in fact mimicking the predatory male way of approaching people, typically male, cisgender male way of approaching people. But yeah, I think that's actually quite interesting because I think that really touches on a very common anxiety within a sort of lesbian community.
Yeah, the spell, or whatever power she has, I was unclear what the rules of it were, because I was under the impression like, oh, her dad is just like so fucked up and traumatized from what happened before that he's decided what the rules of this power are. And so I wasn't entirely convinced that like, oh, anybody she has feelings for is under her spell, because that was not made clear in the grandmother's powers. So like,
I think Thelma's might be stronger than her grandma's, and like her grandma was able to control it more until she wasn't, and that's why she kind of just went insane and was in the home, like the little nursing home thing.
That's because he's
like,
drugged her into like
yeah.
submission.
But with hers, it seems as though like it's her subconscious that's in control, which he can't keep getting away with this. Her subconscious here is like anything that she subtly wants happens. So she like, when she wanted her dad dead, and it was like, say no more. But also like that tension between her and her dad also feels very Freudian, and the fact that like she's more nurturing with her mom, even though her mom is more intensely like,
hates
I don't want this child,
resents
I
her.
hate you. But like her relationship with her father is a lot more tension ridden. There's a lot of like him being like, are you still going to church? Are you talking to the preacher? Even though we see in the movie he takes more of the caretaker role on, even though he is scared of his child, and his wife just pretty much completely shuts everything out.
But does he love her? Is he caring for her? Or is he so worried that if she doesn't like him that he's next?
Oh no, I think it's just that the parents are worried that she's going to lose control when she goes off to university. So they're calling her, making sure that her powers aren't.
Yeah, no.
unleashed.
The controlling aspect I understand, but she's always like, oh no, she's always like, my father's a really good person. He's a really nice person. Like that is what she honestly believes about him. And I'm like, is he, or is he like playing that part so that he doesn't get like
I don't
zapped
know,
away?
because it seems like he wasn't like necessarily scared to go. Like the wife pretty much is very like I don't want to talk to her. I want nothing to do with her. I don't want any sort of interaction. I don't want her to think of me, dream of me, nothing. But it seems like he's like less afraid of ticking her off, because obviously, like, if your parents calling you every 15 seconds when you're in college being like, did you go to church today? It's a risk that you would set someone off. But he seems like he doesn't necessarily care as much about the risk, as long as it's like he's making sure she doesn't lose control or like tap into her powers in the way that like falling in love makes you lose your inhibitions and tap into different parts of yourself. Religion, but the religious aspect of this is also questionable, because her seizures also seem like they were gently linking it to some form of like possession.
Yeah, psychogenetic non-epileptic seizures were apparently an affliction that was once like applied to women who they labeled as like witches. So it was kind of like...
Oh, okay. Because the director really talks about her being a witch, like, in very explicit terms.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like
Although
going
I think
on that
we
line.
normally think of like witchcraft as like more precision.
Spells.
'Cause I feel like she does... Like, she doesn't necessarily become a witch until the end of the movie when she knows what she's doing.
She's a witch in the way that Carrie's a witch.
Yeah,
you know?
It's the same. It's like
Yeah.
the traditional witch that we opened with. In some ways, this feels like how I think witchcraft would operate. It would be like something that happens inexplicably around you, and you kind of don't really know, and you don't have much control. I can see that like being a way it's woven, and then like, yeah.
Well, witchcraft does operate, Louisa.
What?
We know that. Witchcraft does operate.
Oh, did I say if?
Yeah, if it will. But I also think she's psychic to a certain extent, because her dreams and her visions and her hallucinations had so much symbolism in them. Like the snakes, it was giving Eve and Lilith, like this sort of queer Eve and Lilith relationship.
Fun fact, the director said that wasn't like necessarily anything to do with like religion. He was like, I just like snakes. He's like, I just like snakes. I think that they're...
Sounds pretty gay to me.
I don't know if you guys, the girl who plays Anya, she's a singer in real life. It's OK Kaya. I don't know if you guys listen to her music, but that's the singer.
She was fine. She rocked the hell out of that center part.
Oh my god, she was so pretty.
I have to say, if I was Thelma in this movie and I was at a party with people from my college and I had a fantasy that I was banging the girl that I liked and publicly masturbated, I would leave the town and never come back.
I didn't realize that they had seen her masturbate until...
I don't think they saw her masturbate.
No, but they show a flashback of her touching herself on the couch.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's
I think
horrific.
Oh, I would simply pass away. I don't think I would even...
I
would transfer schools and change my name.
I could not. I would never go back. I would never talk to Anya again. It would just be, couldn't.
Now you understand why she expelled that girl from the universe.
Yeah, yes.
There were also angel numbers everywhere. I don't know. Like, I feel like that was she was always checking her phone, and her phone had like a big ass clock. I think I saw like definitely 1111. There was like a 222 somewhere. I wish I had, remembered what parts. They were just like in the background kind of. But sometimes she'd pick up her phone and it was just like 708. Like, it wasn't a big deal. But like, I don't know. I picked up on that. I noticed it. So I thought she was like clairvoyant, some kind of psychic as well.
The fact that it went through the maternal line, like from the grandma, reminded me of Raw. And with Raw, obviously, like the sort of cannibalism is like a new version of like inherited sort of witchy powers. Obviously, it's not, but you know what I mean. But here, it's like a more traditional kind of inherited witchcraft. And I didn't realize until the end, like I think Ty, you said, like until she embraces it, and you're like, oh, she's a witch. She's like a full-on like manifesting her own power. But that sort of like traditional way that it moves through the maternal line was really interesting, because then it like read more as her as a woman like discovering her power and autonomy and like figuring out her sexuality. Like I guess it hit the nail on the head a little bit more, like with that kind of like historical backing with it, not just in terms of like it was the grandma, but in general of witchcraft.
There is a definite like in her power feminist reading of it, because she literally kills her father despite us indeed pointing out that her mother was 10 times more hostile than her father was. So yeah, I guess there is that kind of like breaking the patriarchal expectation of you kind of.
This one is, I'm not sure if this is a good for you film though, because at the end I was like, I guess good for you, but also like, is that girl there willingly? I don't know.
That's what I mean. I was like really conflicted because I was like, I want it to be a good for you moment, but I just don't think it is, because you just imagined her kissing you and then she did, and now I'm like.
Thing is though, like about this, I'm sure like I love manifestation and my crystals and stuff, but someone is gonna watch this and be like, that girl is a master manifester. But she despite her like having this power, I think people usually like pray for the things that they want or manifest the things that they want, but she very much wants to be rid of this, and just would like for like fate to, I guess, step in and do things without her necessarily attracting things to her. She has an entire scene where she's like, God, please save me from these thoughts, and it's sort of while it's heavily implied that she's talking about like the romantic thoughts about women, it's also like the power to bring people to her or get people to do whatever they want, because at that point it's miserable, like you don't know who's there for you or what you're just bringing in. So I feel like that burden that she has when she's asking for God to save her from those thoughts is not specifically necessarily her feelings for Anya, but it's like, save me from not knowing if this Anya really loves me or if it's just me fucking around in her head.
Is she, well, she could never trust anything then.
No.
Like,
yeah.
Right, there's nothing in her life that she doesn't know that she manifested.
Oh, but she
not.
could win the lottery. She could win the lottery so easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would never have to work.
I mean, at the end, I would argue that she's evil because she's pretty much decided, well, if this is how it's going to go, I'm just going to get what I want.
It's the same plot as like every love spell we've seen in every movie. It's the same as the Craft Legacy.
Yeah.
It's the same as Midsummer, where we're like, but does it count? But does it count if it's magic?
Maybe we need like a suspension of disbelief.
As in, like, I was rooting for them. I was still happy.
I saw a lot of people talk about this relationship in Thelma, and they really loved it because it was a happy ending. But at the same time, like, is it happy for Anya? Because
she's manipulated.
Anya dumped her boyfriend solely because Thelma wanted
I was
her to
just
dump her
gonna
boyfriend.
say, I would believe if Anya had like approached her, and she did approach her first, like whatever, in the library or in class or whatever. If she didn't have a boyfriend, then I would have believed it. Then there would have been this like point of like disbelief where I as the viewer can decide if it was real or not. But the way she broke up with her boyfriend for no ass reason, that's when I was like, oh.
But also,
That's
is that
what this
like
is.
problematic, like turning a straight girl gay trope? Thinking of like another side to it, was like if it feeds into like a common lesbian anxiety of like, am I predatory? Then it's also feeding into a common lesbian thing of like, I'm gonna turn a straight girl. I have an obsession. Like, why do you want to sleep with a straight girl?
But she so much didn't want this to happen. Like, her religion was such that she really did not want for this to be the case. Like, until she was sat there in the theater, like, damn near nutting from having a hand on her thigh. Like, she did not want... She was not pride proud. So, like, that makes me feel like her subconscious does manifest everything, but it's also like full of contradictions. Like, she is praying for this not to be the case. Yeah. So that makes me feel like it's not predatory, but if her subconscious says, you know, go for it, who knows? Yeah.
I guess also, yeah, I guess she does. You're right, because like she also gets rid of her, makes her disappear for a time period. So it was
also the birds.
Yes. Care to elaborate on that?
The birds.
The birds.
The birds. The birds.
Yes.
I think they're symbolic of her lack of freedom, because birds are like this. They can fly away, they have freedom, but she doesn't have that option. Like, she's very trapped inside of herself, and her subconscious is winning over what she necessarily wants to be her reality. Like, she didn't hate her baby brother, but she also subconsciously wanted to be the only child, and we saw how that ended. And so, like, her subconscious is bringing about all of this misery that won't allow her to be free and exist in the world.
Who amongst us wouldn't have disappeared our sibling at one point, you know?
I'm the youngest child. I would have been the disappeared one.
Yeah, you would have been got.
Wait, that's so funny. I would be the disappeared one for sure.
Wait, me too. So it's very realistic that, like, because I think, like, the mother looks at her as, like, a demonic figure, but I was like, it's so common for, like, older siblings to not understand, like, why you're suddenly not, because you go from being your parents' whole world into having to share it, which I get such a common thing. Like, they start acting out. It's, needing more attention.
So why does she turn to God?
I think because her family pretty much associated her powers as being demonic, so they just were like, pray away the powers.
But okay, so I have like a logistical question. She was medicated as a child, and when she had her like whatever mental breakdown, and then she was medicated after the incident in college. But was she not medicated for all those years in between? It was just the power of God keeping her like...
Yeah, it was like extreme discipline.
Yeah, the extremeness of the Christianity that they had her following was like, she wasn't going to drink, she wasn't going to do drugs, she wasn't really going to have friends. All she was going to do was go home and
the no
go to
drinking
church.
thing low-key makes sense, because then your subconscious would just run wild.
Shitty powers.
I was going to say.
There's too many offhand things that I think, and...
But, like, in a way, like, it's just quite interesting, because in a lot of, like, telekinesis, like, you would think, oh, that's so cool, like, I would love to have this power. And this film, alongside, like, Carrie, but contrasting it with something like Stranger Things, is like, you would hate to, they make it like quite evident that you would actually hate to have this power, which I think is quite cool.
With Carrie, I'm not sure if I would hate it. It was more like her mom was crazy and her classmates sucked.
She learned how to control it though, in that case. Like Thelma,
like,
also learns later.
Didn't hate your classmates, then you wouldn't do what Carrie did with her powers. So it's not like the power that's necessarily vilified. It's like her anger and revenge streak. But this one, I'm like, I would not want this.
At first I was like, I don't, like Zeba, you said you didn't understand the rules. I didn't understand quite what they entailed, but now thinking about it, especially like in the context of how like extremist religious views play into the film, they're quite Christ-like, her powers, especially when she heals the mum at the end.
Yeah, she's a rival. I think that's like I think the reason why they set up that sort of religion undertone is to be like, this power rivals God, and that's why, like, they're all afraid of it.
Yeah, you're right. This, like, omnipotent kind of power is rivaling God. And that's interesting because they're deeply religious because of that event that happened.
Yeah.
That was the godlike power. It's actually very, very strange.
I mean, I'm not going to be lying. Anytime people are deeply religious, is something wrong. From my experiences. Something went wrong.
It's super similar to how Saint Maud starts, where there's this like unknown trauma.
They have nice
that,
parallels,
like,
actually.
That initiates this thing or whatever hallucination. Is she hallucinating in Thelma?
She is hallucinating / dreaming. That's how I understood it.
Sometimes her dreams become reality. Like when she's a kid, she maybe dreams the baby's in the lake, and then the baby's in the lake.
It's talking about kids not dying on screen.
Yeah. That was rough.
Visually amazing, but like, damn.
It was intense. They didn't hold back. Also, I feel like we talked about like, kids dying, but also dead babies even more taboo. So like, you're just getting taboo after taboo after taboo. Concerns about consent aside, I actually really like the queer depiction in this film. Like, in terms of their meet cute, I felt it was very realistic. I was like, I've done all of these things. I hate libraries. The only reason I went there was to find a bae. And also, like, the idea of, like, I have gone on social media and, like, tried to figure out if someone was queer and been dismayed at their boyfriend.
The other part that's super accurate is immediately unloading their trauma on each other on the first date. They had one glass of wine, and they were like, here is my deepest, darkest fears. And I was like,
true.
I wrote a note, and this was also after I'd seen Saint Maud. I'm like, no offense, but of the alphabet mafia, lesbians in particular are so intense. For what reason? Just chill out.
I don't know.
The stakes are always so high. Like she came in there and she's like, oh yeah, I am super close with my dad, even though he like fucking incessantly calls me all the time and is super controlling, but I love him and he's super great. And then it's just Anya being like, damn, have never known a father. And I'm like, you have had half a glass of wine.
I didn't actually realize that, like, she was making her like her until she, like, showed up at her house in the darkness, and I was like, oh no.
Was she always doing that? I don't know. I can't.
I think
distinguish.
initially no, because they meet because she has the seizure, the first seizure, and then Anya finds her at the pool later and is like, "Oh, are you okay?"
Yeah.
But I think the first seizure is what initiates it. Like
Exactly.
everybody was asking if she was okay, because she was constantly having seizures, and everyone had to like hold her. And she fucking pissed herself in the classroom. Like, it makes sense that she, like, people would, like,
there were
check
a lot
up
of
on
reasons
her.
why I would legitimately move away and never talk to anyone in this movie.
A lot of things in this movie.
Yeah, too embarrassing to overcome.
Her orientation week was not great. But, like, for her to follow up and go to the pool to find her, that's
That
when
was
I was like,
cute.
but I think the first seizure is when it initiated specific fascination with her. Yeah.
She did see her in the library. I actually agree with Zeba. I think it was from the jump.
Yeah.
It was
That's
a cute,
sad.
imagined relationship that she forced, but it was cute. Like that scene in the club where they're dancing to Agnes Opal, chef's kiss.
I feel like that's just the common thread in lesbian. Like, even in Memento Mori, like, one was super controlling and codependent. It's just, like, a common thing now in, like, all these lesbian films. Yeah. It's not too distant from reality.
But it's also in all teen stuff in general, because they love those, like, relationships where it's, like, the only thing keeping this boy from going to juvie and fighting everybody is this girl.
True. I love... in recent media, the psychokinesis repression as a metaphor for, like, queerness. I don't know why that works as, like, such an excellent metaphor, but it worked in Thelma and it worked in I Am Not Okay With This. Still so devastated that did not get a season 2 because it was so good. But yeah, why does that work so well with queerness? I guess I know why, because, like, the repression, like, there could be something powerful in it, but yeah, I don't know why, but that imagery really aligns well.
Every kid wants their superpower, and then, like, when you turn something like being, like, so ashamed of your sexuality into a superpower, then I think that resonates with, like, especially young queer kids.
Mila, that's beautiful.
You didn't expect that from me, did ya?
Is that Tyia?
Wholesome shit. Is that
Tyia?
I felt so bad I was watching with my roommate who has epilepsy, so cannot be near the flashing lights. And so that whole long scene where they're, like, trying to, like, initiate the epilepsy, my poor roommate's, like, head down, like, is it over? It was never over.
It was really hard to watch
through the
that
whole
as
thing.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very intense. It was almost body horror. I can't explain why. It was just quite, like, sensory. Like, I'm sure there's a better way to describe it, but yeah.
And I think The Hunger did it with the score. It had these really high, like, irritating, like, decibels that were going on. And then I felt the same, and I felt the same way with the flashing lights and stuff. Like, it like, activated the same part of my frontal lobe or whatever that's like, okay, we're gay now. I don't know.
Zeba, I don't think you take much converting. I thought it was interesting that the grandmother died of cancer, because they say that, like, they used to be this, like, widespread belief, or it might still be a thing, that, like, emotional repression was a cause of cancer. Like, that was one thing that people thought caused it. So it was interesting that, like, the theme in here is, like, repression. And then her grandma, who was, like, very heavily medicated, very repressed, died of cancer.
Säg hur du har lagt den hem, Thelma. Thelma, går du lagt den hem?
In St. Maud, a young nurse begins following strict Christian principles after a traumatic incident forces her to abandon her hospital posting and move into private palliative care. In her new position, Maud becomes fixated on saving the soul of her patient, Amanda, a glamorous former dancer and choreographer whose lifestyle and atheist beliefs worries Maud.
You should have some fun while you still can. I've got more important things on my mind.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, how could mere human frivolity possibly compete with the Heavenly Father's warm heart pulsing?
Let's go.
I saw St. Maud with my sister, and we were watching this. She was like, where is this being filmed? Is this, like, Jersey Shore or Staten Island? And I said, I think it's in Brighton.
No, it's filmed in Scarborough, and it's based on Hastings.
No, dude, the other day described Brighton as the Jersey Shore of the UK. Like,
wow.
But gay.
But I think it's interesting that this and Thelma are both people who are coming to religion out of trauma and later in life. Like, Thelma's parents were not super religious, I think, until the incident. And so, like, I think that's super different from, well, I guess she,
have you
as
ever
a child,
seen a
was
preacher?
raised into it.
They're always, every preacher you meet is always like, I used to be in the world. I used to be really in the world. And then they find God. It's never like people who mildly were like, yeah, I really like religion. Like, this is cool. I got a theology degree.
It feels super different from Carrie, who, like, intergenerationally was, like, you know, super scared and super religious.
Yeah.
I feel like that's why the form that we see in these two movies is like almost linked to well, it is linked to violence, to be quite honest.
Yeah, almost.
Because like the guilt and the trauma that happened in both of these films causes them to like pretty much torture themselves.
It's guilt in both of them. What's queer about that? There's something queer about that, about
it's like guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Shame is it's at the center of like figuring out you exist within a queer space. There's so much shame and guilt around that, like, and it takes so long to realize like that is shame.
As much as I acknowledge that religion has a lot to do with it, I really want like a queer film that does not like attribute the shame and guilt to religion, because I was like, I think we need to explore how it happens in other ways as well.
I do appreciate that, like, in Saint Maud, she has like shame and guilt from several different things in her life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, she is not who she is portraying in order to get to heaven. I think that is part of what makes this so funny to me, because like an essential part of Christianity, the way that I was raised, is that you have to be like authentically there, not necessarily like doing everything to get to heaven with the intention to get to heaven. Like, I don't know if you guys saw The Good Place, but like the thing was like you only got the good points that counted towards going to the good place if you did something altruistically good, and not because you knew you were going to get points for it. Otherwise it just deducted because you weren't doing it to be good, you were just doing it to get ahead.
She was a faker in Saint Maud.
She was a faker, and then she would have like these relapses where she like gave in to doing everything she actually wanted to do, and like go ride 3 dudes and suck a dick in the bathroom. Like,
is that what she wanted to do though?
I thought that was like her having a breakdown and thinking, God has rejected me, so she was almost like spitefully being like, well, I'll reject him and do things that I did before that he would have hated.
I don't think she was doing it for like her pleasure.
Into rape as well.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, I feel like she did those things because when she felt like, oh, I already am not gonna go to heaven or something, she immediately did like the worst thing that she was drawn to do. Not that sex is a bad thing. Obviously do what you want, guys, with who you want, but like, say for instance, like you're on a diet and then you're at work and they have a party and eat a slice of cake, and then you go home and say, well, I already messed up my diet today, so I'm just gonna eat pizza and go get some ice cream or something. Like, she just like threw it all on at once and was like, I'm gonna drive it home because I already messed up.
And folks at that like club knew her from before, bar, wherever she was at. Like, I got the sense that her life before she was saved or whatever is like she used to do that kind of thing all the time. But like that's where I'm, Louisa, I see what you're saying, like, where does the religion come in? Because like her guilt comes from killing somebody or like accidentally killing somebody. Why then does she have guilt for every other like perceived sin she's also done?
All sins are supposed to be weighted equally in the Bible. So I think in her mind, she's like, if I save a soul, that changes out the one that I took accidentally.
Yeah.
And then if I don't commit any sins, then and live like this completely holy life, then it erases everything that I've ever done that was sinful. Because yeah, I also get the sense that she might have been a very different before, because the guy made the implication that she used to do that every night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's about control in the sense that, like, you know how people who, I think in sort of a trauma reading of it being like, she was very out of control in that situation. So like she went it's almost like some people find freedom in submitting to that. Like, you would think it's like rigorous control, but some people find freedom to that because it's like you're submitting to God's will. So I think it was almost about like she's going to undergo this incredible control to like sort of under this sort of strict religion doctrine, in a sense of like paradoxically regaining control over her life, that she, or like if it's in God's hands and she can feel less guilty, like that kind of thing. Also, that scene was apparently, Rose Glass said in an interview for Vulture.
Which scene?
The scene where the traumatic incident in the hospital where she's giving CPR and she kills the man. Apparently that was based on an actual instance that Rose's Glass like nurse friend had told her. So her friend was a nurse and she was given CPR on a guy who just had chest surgery, and he went into cardiac arrest, and he's really fragile. She broke his chest and like squished underneath, and that's what happened. This film is very much exploring the PTSD that comes along with like nursing so casually, which is why I don't understand why Boris Johnson gave nurses in the UK just a 1% pay rise.
I'm happy you got that in there somehow. Shitting on Boris, thank you. Yeah.
Always.
Especially after he almost died from COVID in the hospital.
Interesting.
Now that you've mentioned the PTSD element, like I feel like how I understood the film like actually seemed a tad offensive, but the way that she hears God's voice and she hallucinates these demons around her and she like has this sort of crusade to save this woman's soul, I understood it very much as her religion was schizophrenia. It was, it seemed almost clinical to me, the way that she was like declining into psychoses. But now that you've mentioned, and like some of that might be true, but now that you've mentioned the PTSD element, I think it's more leaning towards PTSD and
but that
not
can
like
cause that other, like what you're talking about anyway. So they're not like disconnected. It's quite linked.
But she wasn't exactly following a doctrine either. Like it seemed like she was making up what the rules of this religion were, because like God in her head was speaking like Welsh, and I don't know if she was supposed to be Welsh or something like that. But I'm like,
I don't think she was talking to God. That's a story for a different day.
So apparently, like, first of all, that was actually the actress's voice pitched down, and the actress Morfydd Clark can actually speak. She's a Welsh actress, so she can speak Welsh. So they and Rose Glass wanted her voice to be the voice of God because she wanted to. She's fueling the delusion.
It's like in her head.
Rose Glass was going more with the sort of what you're saying, Mila, the psychology aspect, the delusional aspect. Also, there, like what you're kind of indicating, Tyia, like there are people who have interpreted it as like it's not necessarily the voice of God. It could be the voice of the devil who's corrupting her and like forcing her to do like these things the whole time. Some people have read the whole film like that.
Yn fuan fe fyddwn ymuno ar coflediad mawr. Rwyt ti'n gwybod ers amser mae gêm yn unig yw'r byd hon. Dy fywyd, plentyndod.
I don't think it is that.
I mean, I think it's more delusion. I think it's pretty clear.
An aspect of it is like when she at the end goes to that woman's house to harass her some more. And then she imagines her as turning into the devil, and she's like, I should have known it was you all along. And she was like, he should be enough for you. I think in a way it is definitely implying that somewhere along the lines she has definitely lost
her mind.
Lost her mind and lost the goal that she was trying to obtain, which I think she originally was like, she latched on to this extreme religion because she wanted forgiveness for something she did wrong, and somewhere along the lines what it turned into was punishment, not just for her but for other people, for things that she was interpreting they were doing that didn't fit this religion that she created.
I think it goes into a lot of ego, like it becomes about ego and control in a way of like similar to Thelma, a playing God scenario. And they even have those William Blake, very explicit William Blake reference, and he very much talks about like how he had like several texts like there is no natural religion or all religions are one, and he was very much like reject religion and go with like inner spirituality, which he kind of called the poetic genius, and he kind of equates God to like the bard of a poet. It's like all about creation and inner creation. So like the William Blake references was quite clever because it showed like how someone's like, yeah, it can be like, a lot of people say like, oh, you don't need to follow a natural religion or like the rules of religion, you can do like based on your own sort of spirituality. But then this completely corrupts that because it makes it about ego. It's like, well, what happened if you thought like you could decide the rules? If you took sort of Blake's idea of like spiritualism and then corrupted it and made it about your own will, your own guilt, your own power, your own desire.
Yeah, I think why I preface like my connection between her religious conversion and mental illness was because I did feel like the film was making quite like a tentative link between belief and delusion, and now, like you say, ego. Although Amanda is like explicitly atheist, or at least like quite dismissive of organized religion as expressed by Maud, the film to me did give off quite a like subtle or not like quite an atheist vibe to it, and that's why like the understanding of her religious experience being tied to mental illness to me felt like maybe offensive, because it is suggesting like quite a negative and like damning view of religion to me, like maybe in the context of you twisting it to your own gain and your own ego, but like even beyond that, it didn't seem pro-religion, you know, or like very neutral to it.
I think it is neutral. The director had a really religious upbringing, and she was like, I didn't even consciously want this to condemn religion. It's just that, like, I don't know, that just was the kind of setting for it.
This movie, and actually all the movies that we did on this episode, I think have a very, oh God, I don't want to say interesting, have a very fascinating perception of like loneliness as a means to unlocking the most unsavory parts of oneself. Like in the first film, her loneliness is like making her turn into this very predatory form of a vampire that is luring people into forever death so that she doesn't have to be alone. And then in Thelma, she knows what her power is doing, but she doesn't want to be alone, and so she just kind of accepts it. And in this movie, Maud is so lonely but she's lonely in the sense that she's trapped in like a chamber of her guilt and shame. And I think that's why there's that entire scene where she starts seeing the lady as a devil, because in her mind, everyone needs a little help from Maud. And she's the one who can save a soul, and that is the hard work that she's just been tasked to do on this earth. But in actuality, I think, as I said, I believe she's not communicating with who she thinks she's communicating with. I'm not going to say the devil per se, but I think she's definitely tapped into a very dark side of herself that she's listening to, that's subconscious. Again, he can't keep getting away with this, but the subconscious that is maybe slightly enjoyed the fact that she killed this person. That is part of the guilt that she feels, and that is why she's continuing to do the same thing, and she's also inflicting pain upon herself. But yeah, I think the compelling portrayal of loneliness as means to doing something cruel things or unlocking dark parts of oneself is interesting as a theme that we see across these movies.
Well, yeah, the loneliness point, I just had a real brain blast about that. All of them having to do with loneliness, and that the experience of queerness must also sort of overlap with loneliness, is really in contrast to like the philosophy of queer community. None of these people have friends. Yeah. They don't have community. They don't know any other gay people besides the person that they're targeting. And Amanda does. She has tons of friends who all come to her birthday party or whatever the thing was happening, and she has this, you know, like younger woman who she's seeing or sleeping with or dating or whatever the situation with. And that's why she's so content to die, right? Like she is on her deathbed, and she's living her life to the fullest. All her people are around her, communities around her, they all support her so completely, and she's sort of at peace with it. And what What Maud is seeing in her is like, you can't be happy. You must not be happy. I need to be the one to guide you to being at peace with the fact that you're dying. Honestly, I think she already was. And anything she says to Maud is like to fuck with her a little bit, because she's bored. She's bored, and also like there's this fucking bitch with a stick up her ass in your house every goddamn day, and your days are numbered. She's sick of her. She doesn't want her around. She's like, let me play some games with her. I don't think Maud meant very much to Amanda, because Amanda has queer community, and she has people who accept her, and she has reached this point of being at peace. So she's ready to go.
But Amanda meant a lot to Maud. She was very possessive.
But Amanda meant a lot to Maud, and she was jealous of Maud for having other women, for having friends, for having community.
You mean jealous
who supported
of
her.
Amanda?
Or jealous of Amanda for having all the things that she did not have, for having all the support that she did not have after her trauma. Like, she has this one other person who's like, oh, are you still nursing? Who tries to check in on her, who tries to be that person for her, but she's already in the thick of it. She already cannot see past her own hallucinations. But in all of these films, the only people who survive are the ones with community. So even way back in The Hunger, there are other vampires, and that's acknowledged in it, that there is this like community of like people
underground community,
who feed off of youth. That's why she's fine in the end. The only people who end up dead or suffering or like forever alone are like those who never found queer community. I don't think that's on purpose, but it would be interesting to see a horror movie that's explicitly queer where the person isn't so abjectly lonely.
Yeah. That is
or even just has friends, not even romantic connections. Like, where are your fucking friends, dude?
Yeah.
I mean, in Maud's case, I can see why she wouldn't have any friends. In Thelma's case,
she did. She rejected them, though.
Amanda actually makes the offhand comment to Maud. What wasn't offhand, it was very on hand. Where she says, like, you must be the loneliest girl in the world.
Yeah.
And she's very offended when she says that to her.
I feel like the director kind of also pushes that kind of Maud is lonely interpretation over the Maud is gay interpretation. But I don't know. I'm going to read you this quote because I kind of took issue with it, but we could kind of just, you're kind of convincing me more so, Zeba. So there's this interview that Rose Glass did, again for Vulture, and she says, I'm going to just read it out in full because I don't really know how to paraphrase it, but the whole thing with Amanda being gay, I wanted to play with people's expectations. If you place a Christian character alongside a gay character, the audience says, oh, it's going to be a story about repressed desires. Her heart says no, but her body says yes, sort of thing. But I've seen that story quite a lot before. I thought it'd be more interesting if the roots of Maud trying to save Amanda were not all based on her disapproval of her sexuality. It's much more ambiguous. There's an element of physical attraction, but for me, it's not about Maud repressing her sexuality. Sometimes women bonding with other women can take on almost a romantic tinge. I think part of her envies Amanda and wishes she could be a bit more like her in the sense of like with her freedom. I don't know. I was like a bit with that quote because I was like, okay, it's a little bit of a
queerbaity.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a queerbaity kind of memento mori thing where you make something very explicitly gay, and then you say like, oh, it's not necessarily gay. And it's like, I think, to be fair, I think Rose Glass is acknowledging that, of course, there was a physical attraction, which is more than the other directors that we've talked about have done, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, I kind of read this as very explicitly gay. I was like, of course, there's other elements to it, but I read it as like, no, she's jealous. The whole time, she's jealous of Amanda when she gets a new caretaker. She feels like she's been replaced. It's not just about trying to save her soul. If anything, that's kind of more of a crutch for, like, you know, her not having to confront her sexuality. I kind of read it in a very explicitly gay terms, but interestingly enough, the director kind of, again, was kind of trying to widen it. And all the reviews I read also weren't really commenting on, they just kind of offhandedly mentioned that she was jealous. Like, they don't really talk about the queerness.
It's kind of like Jennifer's Body, where it's like people so believe that like women have natural jealousy towards each other, and that's not true. There's always a level of attraction there. The second I knew that this was explicitly gay is when she was jealous of Amanda's lover, whoever she was to her. I don't know if they were like exclusive or whatever. I'm like, see, that's not something you would do if you weren't looking to be in that girl's place. Because then you're not just jealous of Amanda, you're also jealous of her girlfriend. And that you are not her.
It's not just about freedom and repressed desires. And I appreciate that it would have been trite to have a sort of repressed versus freedom like metaphor. And I like the fact that the film does widen it by going more into Maud's background and whatever, and her future and her religious whatever. But at the same time, I was kind of like, I don't think you can make this as gay as you did and then say it's not just gay. It is just gay, and religion is... Yeah, it's not just gay is feeding into religion. It's religion's feeding into the gay here.
I don't think what she says necessarily makes sense. No offense to her, it is her piece of work. She didn't write it, but there's like an entire thing when Maud confronts Amanda's friend, who's, from my interpretation, she was an escort that Amanda hires to sleep with her. But when she confronts her and tells her, like, you can't come here, it seems as though she's explicitly saying the fact that she is a woman having sex with another woman is what makes this detrimental to Maud, saving Maud's soul. So her saying that, like,
Doesn't she explicitly say, though, that it doesn't matter if you were a man, she's dying, she shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z?
She does, but it didn't convince me. It didn't convince me.
It sounded like she was lying.
Yeah.
Overcompensating.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
Weird. Like the interaction that they had seemed as though she was implying that, because she doesn't like monitor the way that Maud interacts with men at her birthday party. She's just like, I can't believe this bitch came back to this party. Like,
yeah.
So it seems more like she does have somewhat of an issue with it, but it's not necessarily the issue is that she hates that Amanda's gay. It seems like I agree with Zeba that she's angry that she's not in that girl's place, but she doesn't know how to deal with it.
We briefly saw in your notes, Louisa, the godgasms.
The director calls it godgasms herself. She said that the reason for having godgasms was... I actually quite liked this point. She was saying, like, not a lot of people would, like, connect with the feeling of, like, vigorous religious favor, like, being overcome with the God's love. And she was like, well, how can I make it sort of... Mila.
In Greek mythology, didn't they often kind of imply that like very pious people or very favored people would be able to have sexual experiences with the gods?
No, it's so true. Like in all like all the sort of saints texts are so much fun to read. The sort of female saints texts, because they do, or like Jesus's wives, they're so much fun. Like the medieval ones, because they literally have blatantly sexual experiences. Like, and it's like kind of hot. Anyway.
That's some good shit.
I had a lot of fun in my medieval literature seminar.
Please.
But Rose Glass was, so it is like a thing of like there have been like documented moments of like women having like orgasms in appreciation of God. So, but I think that Rose Glass says she did that so that you would be able to relate to Maud, because she's like, well, not everyone can relate to like overwhelming love, like, or love God's affection, but they can relate to an orgasm most likely. So she did it as a sort of like way to access everyone in the audience, which I think was actually really clever, to focus on the body element of it.
But it was like, though, it was so like penetrative the way that she was describing like talking to God, that as like, I know lots of religious people describe it as like Jesus comes
he's
in
inside
you.
Yeah,
he's inside you, which is a bit iffy.
It's given Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street 2 vibes.
The way that she would inflict pain upon herself in order to like raise the way that she felt his voice, kind of like how Bella would put herself in dangerous situations to talk to Edward.
I wasn't even thinking about the scene where she puts the nails on her shoes or whatever.
She got that from a BDSM website. Did you know that?
I was about to say, is that kink? I
have actually heard of very religious people doing this.
But not nails in your shoes, right?
No. Not the nails in the shoes specifically as a kink, but I feel like she has like this masochistic streak where like she's like punishing herself, but also that is like to open herself up to God, and God's the only person she seems to be having sex with.
Or at least enjoying it.
Yeah. She deserves the pain that she thinks she deserves the pain she's inflicting on herself, but she also thinks she deserves the pain of like depriving herself of pleasure in the way that she naturally wants.
Yeah.
And she likes it. No, I'm just kidding. This is a kink.
She does like it.
I hope she had a tetanus shot for those nails.
That was horrific.
Going off of the nail thing, that this was an excellent sort of body horror as well. The sort of self-flagellation, the abjection with her vomit, her urine, her picking her scab, and that wound. But also kind of like Suspiria 2, or the remake, I guess. The sort of parallel between dance and like demonic or witchcraft or sort of possession.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I didn't actually notice it until I watched, or I noticed like the body is a stage, and I thought that was quite interesting. But I didn't really catch on to it until I watched Lucas Blue on YouTube was doing a breakdown of this film, and he kind of talked about like how Amanda's kind of surrounded by imagery. Like one of the posters that like you only get a split second view of that Maud's going through has like K666 on it, and like Amanda's kind of associated with like sin and demonic possession, and I think also they're kind of going that route with like the body as well, body being connected and contorting, dance association with like possession and all that. Yeah, I also like the way they make heterochromia look like terrifying in this film. Like also apparently like she has those eye colors, like this different eye colors the whole way through, but like they just chose to like really play with light to really highlight it at certain times. Like there are times where she's most deranged. Was quite scary. So I think this is a great body horror kind of film as well.
It was also very funny.
What?
Anyway.
Mila's like, I loved this horror comedy by A24.
No, listen, let me defend myself here. Like, for example, when she said, like, she arrives and she's like, oh, what's she like to the other caretaker? She's like, she's alright, a bit of a cunt. Like, it's fucking funny. Maybe it's like the sort of slightly depressing English type of humor, and that's why I liked it.
Babe, I also had an English upbringing, and I'm not saying I was ha-ha-haing, so what's your excuse?
But Louisa, you don't like comedy or joy or laughter, so maybe you weren't looking for it.
Within, like, religious communities, that sort of shame around sexuality is obviously pivotal.
Huge, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
We need more queer films without it, because I think shame and guilt comes from society anyway.
I think they do it so that they don't have to confront the idea of like maybe it's bad that we've structured people in like heterosexual monogamous relationships for the sake of capitalism. Like I think a lot of media deflects onto religion to like not have to confront that.
Part of her shame and guilt comes from society in this film as well, even though a lot of it does come from religion, and this is a very religious film. I would say even so more so than Thelma, which is less religious but also religious. But in this one, because like her nursing license and there's consequences for her actions, the extreme ways that she lashes out at people, and people think she's a weirdo and no one really wants to eat lunch with her, and guys only want to be seen with her in the back room or in her little dirty bedroom. Like I think there is an element that she is a fringe of society, and that there is shame and like she is a pariah within the town that she lives in because of who she is. So I do think there is like some societal shame in this film that we don't necessarily see with the other ones, because I mean in The Hunger she's glamorous, she's French, so
she is the moment.
She's French. She is the French cool girl style that everyone on Instagram freaks out over. And Thelma is more like her parents, which is a different type of thing, I think, out than religion, because like your parents' perception of you is a different type of relationship than society's perception. But in this one, we don't really get a sense of anything about Maud's family or anything. She has like that one girl who she doesn't like, who the girl also doesn't really like her, but she's trying to be nice to her for whatever reason. And then she has everybody else in town who hates her and thinks she's a freak. So I think this is the only one that kind of tinges on what is it like to actually be the as Amanda said, like the loneliest girl she ever met. There's no one who wants to be around her at all. That's partially probably why she's so damn crazy. And then again, I'm about to come back to the same little he should be enough for you thing, is she is not fulfilled by that religion at all. That's why she is inventing different aspects, because she is so lonely. And she thought that
she did not sound like a party to hang out with before either, though.
Didn't.
Like it didn't sound like she had a whole lot of
She's
friends.
Never really seemed that fun, but I think religion to her turned into not only forgiveness, but like having a friend. But then she realized that like God isn't enough for her as a friend. And so she just keeps creating aspects of it, like, oh, I'm meant to bring people in. Oh, I'm meant to do this thing. And, oh, if I do this thing, then I can talk to God more, and then I'll be able to have a friend again. Like, it's just such a spiral for her that I think is different than
Interesting that you say spiral. There's reoccurring imagery to a spiral throughout the film. So
the vortexes in the beers.
Yes, there's a lot of vortexes. You have the beers, which is something that I also got from Lucas Blue on YouTube. He points out and the storm's eye spiral and the fact that she burns.
It's very biblical.
So yeah, it's very biblical because apparently, and this again from Lucas Blue, so when you burn yourself, the term burnt offering in Hebrew can translate to like to cause to ascend. So like you can look at a spiral going down or up, and that's kind of like what she like this kind of, or you could also look at it as like her inward spiral, like her psychological spiral. But also there's spiral imagery even from the Get, not just the beers. She constantly shows like sink straining.
I thought that was more like classic horror.
I thought so too, but then I think it's like reinforcing that imagery from the beginning.
But okay, things like that, that's when I wasn't sure if it's all hallucination, if there's actually like some evil afoot. Like the
evil afoot.
I love when you say that.
The things that were externalized. Like the beer, I wasn't sure. I'm like, is that really happening, or is she seeing things? Like some things seem to be.
I think she's seeing it.
I think she is the evil afoot. I actually think she is. I think this spiral.
But wouldn't people see her if she was the real evil?
They did. They watched her on that beach and they all said, girl, don't do it.
They don't see her as she imagines herself with angel wings. It snaps back to reality in that last frame.
I love that.
Yeah. Because in her mind, she thinks that's what she is.
Yeah.
She thinks she's making this great ascent to heaven. But, I mean, biblically, suicide is not the way that you ascend.
Yeah.
I truly think we're watching her descend.
No, but she was martyring herself. I think that's the difference.
A spiral can go up or down, right? Like that's the ambiguity.
When you're martyring yourself, though, you're dying for a cause.
Yeah,
she's dying because she wants to release herself. She wants to release herself of her subconscious guilt of not feeling like all the religious effort she made was enough for her. So she made up this entire elaborate plot of saving Amanda as being the final thing she needed to do, and she knew damn well that was just not true.
I don't think she did know. I think that she was fully delusional and thought that she was doing the right steps.
I think she also just had queer repression and being like, I'm obsessed with saving her, so I don't have to confront. Yeah, little evil gay girl.
There should have been a film. I feel like this could have been a cult film.
Oh yeah,
like cult. Classic or cult?
Yeah.
Including cults?
A cult. Like, I feel like she needed
a cult.
She needed a queer community.
Yeah, I was going to say, she needs a community.
What are cults but not queer communities?
Yeah, I think this could have been a cult movie. Maybe she can make a sequel. Rose, if you're listening to this and you have this idea that comes to you, I'm 10,000% going to reference this episode. But follow up to where maybe some young nurse makes a similar mistake. She finds out about Maud and starts to follow Maud as though she's a prophet, and they create a whole little cult off of it.
All of the saints had like a cult following, so that would be really cool sequel. Thank you for listening to The Monstrous Feminine. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, SoundCloud, and Spotify at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast, and on Twitter at The MonFemPod. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts to be our next Witch of the Week. We also have a TikTok. Follow us at The Monstrous Feminine Pod for podcast clips and more fun. And subscribe to our Patreon. Brooms up, witches out.